The Milwaukee Bucks have failed Giannis. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to All 30. I hope you guys are all having a great day so far. My name's Devin, and today we are going to be talking about the Milwaukee Bucks and how they have failed Giannis. All 30 is a channel where you can find all things about all 30 teams in the NBA, so if you're an NBA fan, hit the subscribe button, and let's get into the video. So, first things first, before I get into the offseason and what the Milwaukee Bucks have done, which is pretty wild, especially just today alone, let's talk about how we got here. So let me preface this. I'm a Blazers fan, and as much as I love Damian Lillard, the downfall of the Milwaukee Bucks really happened after they traded for him 2 years ago. The team seemed like they were the team to beat in the Eastern Conference, as now you had one of the best duos the NBA has ever seen with Dame and Giannis. You had a sharpshooter in Damian Lillard, one of the best shooters the NBA has ever seen, coming off of a few historic seasons with the Blazers, and now he's teaming up with multi-time MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo. They still had Chris Middleton and Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, and it seemed like this was Dame's one and true chance to go out and win a title. And after a phenomenal regular season, the playoffs came, but unfortunately it didn't go in their favor. The Bucks ended up losing in Game 5 of the first round to the Indiana Pacers, but they were without Giannis, and so it wasn't a huge surprise. After all, injury luck like that isn't something that you can exactly predict, and so I still think the hopes were high over there in Milwaukee. And that offseason, they didn't really make a lot of moves. They brought in Gary Trent Jr., they brought in Taurean Prince and drafted AJ Johnson, but they kind of kept their main core the same. And so they were still a strong team and were the 5th ranked team in the Eastern Conference. Now, this trade deadline just this past February in 2025 is really where some big changes were made. Chris Middleton, who had kind of been on the decline for the last couple of seasons but was still a viable 3rd or 4th option most nights, was traded to the Washington Wizards in a deal for Kyle Kuzma and a few second-round picks. At the deadline, they also brought in Kevin Porter Jr., and they did that by trading away Marjon Beauchamp. And this is where we see a little bit of a shakeup. After all, Chris Middleton had helped them win the title in 2021, and this kind of seemed like their move to add a little bit more talent around Dame and Giannis by bringing in another score-first forward in Kyle Kuzma. And like I said, at the time, they were still 5th in the East, and so it looked like it could pan out well for them. But then the season ends and the playoffs come. Damian Lillard was hurt with a calf strain for Game 1, came back for Games 2 and 3, but then in Game 4, the worst thing imaginable happened. Damian Lillard suffered a torn Achilles. And just like that, the 2025 playoffs felt eerily like the 2024 playoffs, losing to 5 games versus Indiana. This was an absolutely heartbreaking loss for the Bucks at the time, and that's where we get to present day. So how did the Bucks let down Giannis exactly? Well, I'm glad you asked. On the morning of July 1st, the Milwaukee Bucks signed Myles Turner for 4 years, $107 million. Now, this was actually a pretty close deal to what the Pacers actually could have signed Myles Turner for, but the Pacers were $20 million under the tax line for this upcoming season, and had they signed Myles Turner, it just barely would have pushed them into the tax. And with Tyrese Halliburton's Achilles injury that happened in Game 7 of the finals, it just seems like the Pacers don't want to go into the tax line, especially when they're not going to be able to compete next year. And so Myles Turner signs 4 years, $107 million with the Milwaukee Bucks, and this seemed like a smart upgrade, especially after losing Brook Lopez. But after initially getting reported, it left a lot of questions. How is Milwaukee affording this? But then, just a short few minutes later, it's announced that Milwaukee has waived and stretched Damian Lillard's $113 million contract. So what does this mean exactly? You don't really see teams waive and stretching contracts too often, especially one this large. But essentially what this means is that they're able to waive Damian Lillard, so he's no longer on the team anymore, but they still owe him his money. He was owed that money in the next 2 seasons, so by the end of the 2026-2027 season, he would have been totally paid off. But now Milwaukee is able to waive him off the team and instead split that money up over 5 years. So regardless of where Dame goes to sign, that might be a video coming in the future, hopefully he re-signs with the Blazers, but who knows. Regardless of where he goes though, Dame is going to be getting paid $22.5 million a year for 5 years just from the Bucks, even though he won't even be playing on their team. And so automatically every season for the next 5 years, that puts the Bucks $22.5 million under the tax. That is a cost on their books that they have to pay no matter what each year just by waiving him. And this really leaves the Bucks in a really rough spot. I'll put a picture up on screen now, but this is the projected starting lineup, and I can't even begin to imagine how much this team is going to struggle when Giannis isn't on the court. And as of right now, their depth chart is as follows. They have Kevin Porter Jr. at the starting spot, Gary Trent Jr., Kyle Kuzma, Giannis, and Myles Turner. Then you have a guy like Bobby Portis, who is balancing out between the backup power forward and center minutes. You have Taurean Prince, Ajax, and Pat Connaughton as your backup shooting guard and small forward. But the big question is, who's going to be your backup point guard? Me personally, I would be all in favor of the Bucks going out and signing some sort of veteran guard to a minimum, whether that's a guy like Chris Paul, Westbrook, Malcolm Brogdon, etc. Just someone who can give you valuable and positive minutes off the bench behind Kevin Porter would be huge. Because the Bucks are going to have to make a few more moves if they want to keep Giannis happy. Because if I'm him and my second and third options scoring wise are Kyle Kuzma and Gary Trent Jr., I'm losing my mind. And there are reports that Giannis actually helped recruit Myles Turner to the Bucks, and so he had to have had some idea that Dame was going to be gone. But there were also reports that came out from Chris Haynes that Giannis is not happy at all about what they did with Dame. And so I'm not really sure what that means. Maybe Giannis thought they were able to bring in Myles Turner without doing that to Dame, and it sounds like Dame wasn't even notified about this beforehand. He found out morning of, just like the rest of us. And so that just leaves a lot of questions up in the air. If they're trying to keep Giannis happy, is it really a win to bring in Myles Turner when you cut Damian Lillard? And what does this mean for their future? What are the Bucks going to be able to do the rest of this offseason and the next trade deadline? Well, ideally they find either a starting point guard or a really solid backup point guard who's about on the same level as Kevin Porter Jr. KPJ could definitely hold it down, but he's not going to be your starting point guard on a winning roster in the playoffs, that's for sure. And like I said, even if they just sign someone to the minimum, having a reliable backup point guard would be huge. But comment below your thoughts. Let me know who you want the Bucks to sign and what moves they should make the rest of this offseason. Because right now at this point, I believe that retaining Giannis and keeping him happy on the roster would be the number one priority. I think this is a good sign too, because if the team is already consulting him on making moves like bringing in Myles Turner, then they need to keep working with him on this and constantly checking up with him and checking the pulse on where he's at. Now overall though, I think this is probably the wrong move to make, even though this is definitely what they're going to do. If I was John Horst, what I probably would have done is trade Giannis. Now some of you might think this is just absolutely asinine for me to say that, but think about it. If you trade Giannis, just think about what Kevin Durant went for, right? Kevin Durant, even at his age, went for some pretty valuable stuff. And so if you're the Bucks and you have the opportunity to trade Giannis for his peak value, right? He's still at a point in his career where he's going to have multiple more MVP level seasons ahead of him. And he would make almost any team he goes to a contender right away. And so if you're the Bucks and you have an opportunity to get a handful of picks, get a few young players that are going to set you up for the future, and get off of Giannis's contract and kind of get out of no man's land, then I just don't see how you don't pull the trigger on that. But I get what they're doing. I get when you have a player on the level of Giannis's, you want to keep him happy, you want to keep him on the team, because players like that don't come across your franchise very often, especially ones that are as loyal to the team like Giannis is to the Bucks. But what about Damian Lillard? How does Dame just get cut, and what does he do next? Well, it sounds like the Miami Heat and the Portland Trail Blazers are on his short list of teams that, at least as of right now, he would consider. I think the Blazers definitely make a lot of sense for Dame. I'm trying not to be biased as a Blazers fan here, but Damian Lillard on the Blazers, at least for the next couple of years, just makes sense. It sounds like there's been some reports that he actually wants to finish out his career in Portland. And if he's going to be out for the next season, rehabbing his Achilles, then I just don't see a way where this isn't the play that makes the most sense, right? Because he can heal up and he can rehab and he can be with family in Portland. And if the Blazers sign him to a minimum or a cheaper contract for a couple of years, then he could still be a part of the team. And it sounds like him and Joe Cronin's relationship has actually been mended a bit, and he could just be an additional vet mentor to guys like Scoot Henderson and Shane Sharp. Plus, we know that Dame loves Tamani. So with him rehabbing in Portland, it just makes too much sense for him not to come back, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes somewhere like Miami. Not sure how it affects things considering Jimmy Butler isn't there anymore, and I just don't know what other team Dame would go to, but comment your thoughts. So that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you are new, hit the subscribe button, comment below what topics or teams or videos you want to see from me on this channel, and I'm excited to grow this page with you guys, so be one of the first subscribers, and I hope you guys all have a great day. Until next time, peace out.